Well, hello and welcome back. It's fabulous to be back. We've had a really busy summer, which is the main reason that I haven't had a chance to upload some new videos. But we're moving now into the autumn. It's quietening down a little bit and I've hopefully got a new schedule of videos to share with you. And being that it's the autumn and we're coming up to Halloween and also Harvest Festival, I thought it would be really nice to do an exciting design, in a pumpkin. So what you need to do first of all is to cut the top of your pumpkin off, almost so that you have a little bit of a hat, just the same way as you would do if you were pumpkin carving. So we're going to take the top section off and scoop out all the inside, and then we'll come back in a minute and show you what to do with that pumpkin. And before I prepare and cut mine, I'll just talk through all the bits and pieces that you need to have. Now, supermarket flowers are perfectly acceptable for this type of design. I've got a few florist choice flowers, but anything small from your local greengrocer, your local florist or a supermarket is going to be really good. Don't worry too much about getting large headed flowers because the scale of your design is quite small. Anything too big and too overpowering is going to be out of proportion with the size of your pumpkin. Now you might be looking and thinking that I have quite a clashing, strange colour combination, but I thought it would be nice to do a design that was a bit more vibrant. Now I've got this gorgeous Gerber. This one is a spider Gerber, so it has lots of sort of almost straggly petals, and I thought that would be along the sort of theme of Halloween and spiders and a bit different to what we normally use. This one is a nerine. Now I haven't used nerines before. A gorgeous flower, will grow in the garden quite happily in the UK from a bulb. And what I've looked for is different textures and different shape heads. So if you look at these, they're very different to one another. So they really stand out when you place them alongside one another. Then we have quite a small orange rose. Now this is just an ordinary supermarket rose, two tones, a paler orange, almost an apricot shade with a darker orange top. And then I've introduced some lilac. Now you might be wondering why. I think that's quite a vibrant colour combination, and I like it together. It's not going to be the same as a suitable choice for everybody, but you know, you select your flowers to the budget that you have to work with or your colour choice. You might want to match it with your living room and maybe have creams and browns, or you might like greys. You might be quite vibrant. I've said in a few videos before that colour is definitely seen differently from different people. And then just to sort of zhuzh it up a little bit, I have this really vibrant lime green, very zesty cupressus. Now this one is called Goldcrest. It has a slightly lemony scent to it, and again it's a really good one for growing in the UK. I'm obviously from the UK. You can probably tell by my accent I'm Welsh. So this could probably grow in most European countries. Not quite sure about further afield than that, but it's a really good strong foliage to use. And if you can see, it's curved beautifully, so if you're looking for something for crescent shaped designs, then that would be fantastic to use. Okay, so if we just forget the colour here of the cupressus foliage for a moment, I'm just going to put my pumpkin back there on the top. Now I've also got some of this lovely pampas grass to use. This is a dyed pampas grass, which I'm sure you can work out. And what I will do with this later is I'm going to break it down into smaller pieces so we get some nice texture into the design. Gorgeous corally sort of pink colour, and again really complements my choice of colour. Now if I bring out my trusty colour wheel and we look at colours that lie alongside one another on the colour wheel here. Now it's not perfect, but I've almost got this lilac, red and orange sort of theme here. I know my foliage doesn't come into that category, but if I was strictly working with 3 or 4 colours that lie alongside one another on the colour wheel, then that would be classed as an analogous colour harmony. Some people call it analogous. Depends, I suppose, which part of the world you come from. I often refer to it as analogous, and that's 3 or 4 colours that lie alongside one another on the colour wheel. So if we think about the lilac, then we've got something, a reddy lilac or reddy pink, and then we've got the red from the Gerber, and then we've got the sort of orange tones of the roses and the pumpkins. Now, it's not perfect, but it does help to describe and explain to you a few different colour combinations from the colour wheel. Now, I'm often attracted to colours that lie alongside one another, so I might work in all peaches, sometimes I work in all pink shades, and more vibrant colour combinations are often opposite one another on the colour wheel. Now then, I've also got my trusty scissors. I have a few florist wires that we're going to use, and I'll talk to you about those later on. And I've got a knife to cut the top off, and you will also need to get yourself, this is just the packaging that has come off some flowers. So you're going to need something like cellophane or a plastic bag, something that's waterproof, so that we create a barrier between the flesh of the pumpkin and the floral foam in the middle. And what I will say at this stage is, if you've got a tray at home or a plate, one of those chargers that we use at Christmas, I would sit your pumpkin on top of a base, because at some point over the next couple of weeks, the pumpkins generally, I would say, would last 7 to 10 days. But once we cut them and we open that pumpkin up to the moisture and to the air, then it is going to start rotting from the inside out. And I'll guarantee you that you will come down one morning and your pumpkin will have completely disintegrated on your dining room table or your hall table, and you'll be left with a big gooey mess. So if you sit it on a tray or a plate of some description, then you can easily get rid of it without causing too much mess. So pop back in a minute. I'm going to prepare my base, and I can talk to you about how the design is going to come together. Now at this stage, hopefully you've got a pumpkin, your insides have been cleaned out nicely, and if you're really clever, you'll have kept all of the flesh from the inside, dried off those pumpkin seeds, and you can make yourself a beautiful cake or some pumpkin soup. Now I've not worried too much about the accuracy of taking off the top section. I've just cut it in a very natural way, and we'll just lift the lid off for you to see the rough size. Now, one thing I did forget to mention was I am going to be using kebab sticks. So I've got these have come from a local grocery store, and quite often this time of the year you can find kebab sticks reduced, because obviously barbecue season is over. But I've got a packet of these kebab sticks. If you don't have any kebab sticks, then just some stems from the garden or some garden canes. But that's going to be used to hold the lid of the pumpkin a bit higher than the flowers. All become evident in just a second. Now I've got myself a full block of floral foam. If you compare it to the size of your pumpkin, you need to have the top section of your foam above the size of your pumpkin. And what I've done is I've used that cellophane, that spare piece of cellophane, just to wrap the floral foam in. So I'll just hold that up for you to see. So you can see the cellophane will help stop the water leach out into the pumpkin itself. And I'm going to pop that in there. And I'm just going to use the cellophane and push it back inside. I'm not going to worry about cutting it. It'll help prevent my pumpkin from moving around in there as well. But that's nice and secure. And I've got a good 2 inches or so above the top of my pumpkin. And you can see I've also now got it on a tray. And it's a little bit of a messy job, so you might want a towel to hand as you're working. And I've cut my pumpkin. It wasn't intentional, but it's slightly higher here. So this is going to become my back. And the section which is a little bit lower will now become my front. That's accidental. I didn't plan to do that with the design. Now what I'm going to do with the pumpkin lid is it's going to sit on top here. So you can see then quite clearly where your flower combination needs to go. You don't have to put the lid on. You can make an all-round posy arrangement if you prefer. And a posy design is just the same as one that I would have done flat on the table, so you can look back at a previous video. But for a minute, I'm going to do this quirky sort of pumpkin with a lid there on the top. And what I will do is use my knife. 1 second. It's in the wrong place. I'm just going to take a small section of the pumpkin, oh, it's not pumpkin, the floral foam off the top. So I haven't got quite such a tall section. I'm just going to go all the way around, and I've just chamfered off the edges. It gives you a nicer shape to insert the flowers into, and it reduces the amount of floral foam that I have to cover. Now with my kebab sticks, I think I'm going to cut them in half, but we might swap and change this around. I'm going to have a little go, see how it works. I'm going to place 5 or 6, I think, of the kebab sticks in one section. So they're almost like prongs sitting out on the top. I might have to lower it down in just a second. We'll see how this goes. I think we'll put them down a little bit and move that one possibly around the back. So then my pumpkin lid is going to sort of sit on the top like that. Now if you imagine, now we have this quite large area to fill, so I will probably push this down lower when we come to the end of the design. I think it's going to be a little bit high. But if I've inserted the kebab sticks in there at the beginning, then I know roughly where the lid of my pumpkin is going to go at the end. So I'm just going to remove the pumpkin lid. Because I'm turning the design around frequently, I'm a bit concerned it's going to fall off. But you could leave your pumpkin lid on there. Now, one thing you do need to be a little mindful of is not to push these in so far that they go through the foam and they puncture the waterproof lining and puncture the pumpkin, because then you will have water spilling out onto your table. Right, okay, so let's get started with some flowers. I'm going to start with the really zesty foliage, and we're making quite a small design. This isn't a huge piece. It needs to be in proportion with the pumpkin, so the flowers don't want to be too obtrusive. We still need to be able to see that lovely pumpkin underneath. Good strong scissors when you're using woody materials like this conifer. And you know, if you're flower arranging from the house, just go out into the garden or your friend's or neighbour's garden, see what they have and see how you can use it. It doesn't have to be this textured conifer like I've got. It could be ivy. You might have pittosporum in your garden, but it needs to be a small leafed foliage rather than something big and heavy like a laurel. One thing that will be fabulous this time of the year, if you've got heathers in your garden, if you've got autumn flowering heathers, they would be fantastic in this type of design. Now what I've done is I've gone all the way around the outside, close to the pumpkin on the bottom. So I've created a collar or an outline shape all the way around. Probably got about 6 or 7 pieces around the outside. But I'm just looking at the moment to create an all-round design. So this is one that is seen from the front and from the back and from the sides. And I'm just looking to fairly evenly distribute the colour and the texture. And I'm not worrying about this section here because my pumpkin lid is going to fit on there. I'm going to use up any small piece that I've got left. And if you want to introduce another texture or another coloured foliage, you're more than welcome to. It's just today I've just got this one colour that I felt was a real good contrast between the orange pumpkin. Okay, so let's just spin that round. That's the front there for you to see. Now then, my next flower I'm going to use is the red Gerber, and I've picked this one because it's my larger flower, and I'm going to work from the larger flower to the smaller flower, We need to get a fairly good distribution of the red. It's quite a bold colour and it's a big head. So if we start by equally dispersing these around the pumpkin shape, and it really is, like I said at the beginning, it's a round, all-round design, so it's no different to a design that you would maybe create for a table. So if I just tilt it forward, if I put it this way, it's almost like a clock. So if I think about 12 o'clock on a clock, so that would be straight up, then we've got roughly 4 o'clock and roughly 7. So the space in between each one is fairly similar. So it makes a round, good round shape. Again, you might have 4 main flowers, in which case you want to distribute those 4. I find working in odd numbers with a round shape is far more pleasing than a square sort of shape. Now I'm going to go in with these fantastic, aren't they gorgeous? These are nerines. And this time of the year, you quite often find the nerines for sale as a bulb. And you can pop them in the garden for flowering in the summer and late summer of next year. And what I'm doing with this colour and this flower shape, so the contrast between the two, you've got a contrast in shape and a contrast in colour and texture. And if you think back to the talk I gave on principles and elements of design, there is contrast between these two textures and these colours. So that's that wonderful spiky flowered nerine. If I come back, now I'm looking at it from the front when I'm working, you're looking at it from the back. Now I'm going to go with some of the orange rose. So a little small little head there, and I'm going to remove quite a lot of the foliage off the rose. I'm just going to leave one small set on the top. Rose foliage isn't brilliant for lasting, and it can sometimes get a bit scruffy. So we've removed those off. And again, I'm just looking now to create an even balance. So we're looking to get I've got 5 this time, and I've chosen 5 because they're a slightly smaller head and not as big as the Gerber and the nerine. And I'm going into the floral foam, probably, if we just show you this one, this depth. So it's about 2 centimetres, maybe an inch. Any further down and you just hit all the stems within the floral foam. If you don't go in far enough, so if you don't go in that good inch, then your flowers will start to fall out. But it can make your design, the floral foam just crumble and disintegrate if you try to force too many long stems into the foam. So if you're having a problem with your foam breaking, it possibly is because you're inserting them too deep into the foam. Right, so now we've got a lovely orange colour introduced. And again, if I just bring it forward, you can see that the top section I've left clear because that's where my lid is going to go. And I've tried to evenly distribute the orange throughout the arrangement. Now my sort of main flowers, or what we would refer to as a focal flower, in this case is probably the Gerber because it's the bigger flower. And I've got one at the front, but it's slightly off centre at the front. I don't like things being directly in the middle. If you think of a minion with those sort of headlights on, it's very distracting if one flower is straight smack bang in the middle of your design. So I've slightly offset it to one side in the hope that it won't quite be so dominant and catch your eye so much. All right, now this one is Status. This is a plant material, a cut flower that I use quite a lot. It comes in purples and whites and a lovely lemon colour. Again, if you're in the UK, you'll grow this quite easily in the garden. It's a summer flower, grows very easily from seed. And it dries beautifully as well. So it's one of those flowers that you can keep and dry it and display it in a vase in the house. Now I'm cutting small pieces, so we're only a couple of inches tall, and I'm looking now to evenly spread it throughout. So it's at the front, it's at the back, it's at the sides, it's at the top of the design, and it's at the bottom. gorgeous one to have, lovely. It doesn't like damp conditions. If you have a workroom that's maybe a shed or a garage that's prone to damp, then this one won't last particularly well. It needs to be in a very dry environment. And I'm working my way around. Now we've still got quite a little bit of the floral foam showing, but I've still got the sort of corally pink coloured pampas grass to go in yet. And if I feel that we can still see some of the floral foam, then I will get myself another piece of that lovely lime green zesty foliage to place in. But hopefully we're going to be okay now when I introduce the pampas grass. Okay, now what I'm going to do at this point, we'll just pop the head on the top. That will give you an idea of how it's working. Now we can see straight away from that we've got quite a large section that needs some more flowers in there. Now I have a choice at this stage. I could either squash the lid down a bit further and then we'll cover that hole, or I could look at putting another large flower in there. I think once the pampas grass is in, I'll make that decision. And I'm probably going to push the lid down a bit further to cover the gap. But now I'm going to soften the whole design, take that off again while I'm working, and add some of this fabulous pampas grass. Now hopefully what I'll do is I'll do a close-up video to show you what I'm doing, because you clearly won't be able to see from all the way back there. But what I've done, or what I'm going to do, is I'm going to cut the pampas grass into short pieces, so we get much thinner sections and pieces that aren't quite so long. Then I'm going to use one of these wires. Now this is a 56 gauge wire, and I'm going to use it to wrap around the bottom of the stem, so that I now have them together in one piece, and that then will give me a stem that can be inserted quite nicely into the floral foam. Now using the wire has two sort of benefits in this type of design. It's used as an anchor to hold the pampas grass together in a small bunch, but it also means that I'm inserting just the wire into the floral foam, and obviously the floral foam is wet, and what you need to be careful of with working with dried flowers like this is that they don't get too wet and they don't get too damp, because then they will eventually start to rot. So at the moment when I'm inserting them into the foam, I'm just using the wire section. You can see there we've got that really light and fluffy texture. So by putting it on the wire, it means that it's not getting wet, it's not sucking out the water from in the floral foam, and the pampas grass will stay nice and dry, so when you want to use it again, you'll still have perfectly dry grass to use. Now of course, if you can't get hold of pampas grass like I have here, this is a commercially available one, and again, if you're in the UK, any part of Europe, Mediterranean, all those types of area, this time of the year pampas grass is growing naturally in the garden. It won't be this colour obviously, because it grows in a biscuity colour. In fact, there's some just behind me here, so this is your garden type that you would have. And I'm just going to keep working my way round until all the pampas grass is used up, or until I have enough texture and colour in the arrangement. Now what I have here is a piece of pampas grass, and I've removed it from the main stem, so it's much shorter and more manageable to work with. And I also have a stub wire here. The length doesn't really matter, but it needs to be quite flexible and not too heavy in weight. Then what we're going to do is use the wire behind the pampas grass. So if I just move my finger, it's gone behind the pampas grass. Doesn't matter, you can put it on the front. Maybe if we put it on the front, it'll be easier for you to see. Then I'm going to bend the top section down, so we've almost got what we refer to as a hairpin, and you can see I've left one longer than the other. So I'm just going to change my hand position. Now the longer one, I'm going to wrap around so it goes around the wire and the pampas grass base, and then that holds it all together. So that then will go into the floral foam using these two end wires here. And that's what we refer to in the floristry trade as a single leg mount, because one wire, a single wire, is longer than the other. So that's a single leg mount. Hopefully you can see that quite clearly. Now at this stage I've got enough pampas grass in there to give me the texture and the colour that I want. I think any more it's going to be really quite overpowering. If you feel it's a little bit too long, just snip off a few ends. Try and not to cut it at a really severe angle because it'll look a bit artificial. But just like when you go to the hairdressers and you have your hair thinned out a little bit, just try and quite naturally cut the ends, and it will look far more pleasing than a really blunt finish. Okay, so I think I'm almost done there with my pumpkin. Now we're going to come back to the front, which is here, and I'm going to just push down and move this rose slightly because I noticed this rose was getting hit by the lid when I put the lid on. So we're just going to push them down a little bit so they can support that top section. And then I can sit this back on top, just in the position where I feel it needs to go. I'll have one little look around to see how I feel I could improve. Now I think at this stage I did mention I might need another flower. I think need red Gerber in there, some more of the lime green foliage. So we'll get that and we'll pop back and we'll finish off the pumpkin so you can see what it looks like when it's complete.
And here's the finished design. I think it's worked out really well. I decided in the end to use a pink rose instead of another red Gerber. The rose gave me a fabulous link between the bright pink nerine that's in the front of the design. And overall, it's a really vibrant autumnal design. Now, of course, if you've been enjoying the tutorials, don't forget to subscribe